Welcome to my channel. Today we are exploring Brazil's vanishing village. The year is 1923. For decades, the small Brazilian village of Hoer Verde has been home to a community of gold miners and their families. Life here is hard but good. Lush vegetation surrounds the town, sheltering it from the outside world. The people of Hoer Verde make their living panning for gold in the nearby river. Women grow vegetables and fruits, trading them for tools and supplies brought in by men who travel from the nearest jail. Then one day, a heavy fog rolls into town, so thick that houses are shrouded and familiar faces are hidden. Children playing in the street cannot be seen, nor can the birds in the trees. It is an eerie sight. Days pass and still the fog does not lift. Villagers grow restless, then fearful. Some want to leave the village, but where can they go when they cannot see where they are? Others stay put, believing that if they leave, they will never find their way back home. Then some disappear into the fog, never to be seen again. One day, a rescue party ventures out into the fog to search for the missing villagers. They do not return. When the next group goes out, they too vanish. Soon, the entire town is gone, leaving behind only their homes and the possessions they had set out with. What happened to the people of Hoer Verde? Did they succumb to the strange fog? Did they lose their minds? Or was there something more sinister at foot? Now, let's explore. Our camera glides over dense Brazilian rainforest. Mist is curling through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a waterfall crashes to the ground. Then the mist begins to clear, and we catch our first glimpse of Hoer Verde. The overgrown ruins of the once proud village are sprawled before us, swallowed whole by the encroaching jungle. Vines and weeds have consumed the town, leaving just a few remnants of the buildings which still stand. A weathered signpost points down a long, gone road. Crumbling stone steps lead nowhere, and what appears to be a schoolhouse collapses into a thicket of trees. We pan across the remains of a worker's house, its walls covered in graffiti. A rusted metal bucket and a full glass bottle lie abandoned on a nearby porch. Emerging from the foliage is the skeleton of a two-story building. We climb closer, pushing aside hanging vines to reveal the remains of a fireplace and bookshelf. Peering through a broken window, we can see the outline of a bed in what was once a bedroom. As the sun dips below the tree line, casting long shadows across the village, we come upon the remains of a church. Ivy climbs up the tower and across the roof. Stepping inside, we find the altar and pulpit completely destroyed. But surprisingly, several pews remain intact. They are overturned, but can still be made out, offering a glimpse into the lives of the devout townspeople who once gathered here. Suddenly, a piercing whistle cuts through the stillness of the air. Startled, we whirl around, but there is nothing to be seen. The wind picks up, swirling fallen leaves into a mini tornado and whistling through the gaps in the buildings. As darkness falls, we hear the distant roar of a jaguar and the unsettling call of a night monkey. The sound of an owl hooting adds to the eerie atmosphere, and we feel a growing sense of unease as we contemplate the mysteries of this abandoned town. What caused the people of Hoer Verde to abandon their homes and flee into the unknown? Did they face danger in the surrounding jungle, or were they lured away by something sinister? The truth remains elusive, hidden amongst the ruins of this forgotten village. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support. Until next time, stay curious. This is a reconstruction of life before the silence in Hoer Verde, a small village in northern Argentina. It's based on photos taken by an unknown photographer who documented the daily lives of the villagers between 1940 and 1956. Here we see villagers farming, children playing in the dirt, women hanging their laundry, men gathering at the chapel. The narrator says, Hoer Verde was not a wealthy place. It was not a poor place. It was just a place where people lived, and they lived well. They were happy. The men worked the fields. The women took care of the house. Life was simple. Life was good. There was no reason to think it would end. In 1978, the Argentine military government began to forcibly relocate the villagers from their homes. Their crime, if you could call it that, was simply existing in a place that the government no longer had use for. The government had plans to turn the fertile lands of Hoer Verdes into a military training ground. The people living there had to be moved. The photographer captured images of the people being loaded onto trucks, their belongings piled up beside them. He documented families huddled together on the steps of the chapel, looking out at the rows of abandoned houses, their faces etched with sadness, disbelief, and anger. The military government tried to justify the evictions by claiming the land was owned by the state, that the villagers were squatters. But the people knew the truth. They had been living there for generations. Their families had built those houses with their own hands. The land had been in their families since before it was the government's. And so the photographer followed the villagers as they walked away from their homes, carrying their grief with them, not knowing where they would go, what they would do, how they would survive. He took pictures of the empty houses, the abandoned farmlands, the deserted streets, the piles of discarded clothing and personal belongings left behind by the villagers. He wanted the world to know what had happened here, to bear witness to this injustice. But the world didn't want to see these images. The international news media ignored them. And so the photographer kept taking pictures, hoping someone someday might care. He photographed the land being cleared, the crops being burned, the animals slaughtered. The military government wanted this place erased, and they were doing everything they could to make that happen. The photographer also documented the people, the ones who remained, the ones who refused to leave, like old man Ambrosio, who refused to abandon his home and his land, even though he was too old to farm and his family had already left. Or the family who returned to the village after they were forced to leave. They came back to see if anything had changed, hoping against hope that they could return home. They took their 5 children with them. The photographer captured their disappointment, their sadness at having to explain to their kids why they couldn't stay, why they couldn't come back. In 1984, the government allowed some of the villagers to return to their homes, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The community was destroyed. The village of Hoer Verde had become a ghost town, and the photographer continued to visit, documenting the ruins, the crumbling houses, the weeds growing through the wooden floors, the clothes still hanging on the line, the shoes left by the doorway. He wanted the world to remember what had happened here, to make sure it never happened again. And finally, in 2012, more than 30 years after the first photo was taken, the world got a chance to see these images. They were published in a book called The Silence of Tegwim, and the world finally got to see what the photographer had been trying to show them all those years ago. The faces of the dispossessed, the story of a village that once thrived, that once echoed with the laughter of children, that once bustled with the energy of daily life. A place where people lived and loved and had hope for the future, until one day they didn't. In the early hours of March 1923, 2 Brazilian officials arrived at the settlement of Iratapuru in the state of Paraíba. They were looking forward to a quiet day of work. They had come to count the residents for the upcoming census. But what they found instead was a ghost town. The buildings were all there, but there was no sign of any of the roughly 150 people who lived here. Food sat on the tables as if someone had just gotten up and walked out. Doors were open, beds were unmade, and tools were lying around as if the residents had been working on their homes and then suddenly vanished. It was as if life had stopped in a single instant. The town's church was also empty. Earlier that morning, a priest had been due to arrive to celebrate Mass, but he turned back after seeing a small group of armed men blocking the path to the church. Who were these men? What had happened to the townspeople? And where were they now? This mystery had puzzled investigators for nearly 100 years until recently, when an old leather notebook was discovered in a historical archive in Brazil. The notebook contained handwritten accounts of the events that took place in the town during the 1920s. It told the story of a peaceful community living in the wilderness and the tragedy that befell them. The settlement of Iratapuru was founded by a group of rubber tappers in the early 19th century. Rubber, or more specifically the sap of the rubber tree, was incredibly valuable at this time. It was used to make rubber products such as tires and waterproof clothing, which were in high demand around the world. So the settlers, who were experts in extracting the sap from rubber trees, moved to the remote jungle markets of Brazil and set up small settlements like Iratapuru to be closer to their source of income. Life here was not easy. The settlers lived in constant fear of being attacked by the people who owned the land, the indigenous people. In fact, in 1922, just 1 year before the town's eerie abandonment, a group of indigenous people did attack the settlement, killing several men, women, and children. The survivors fled to nearby towns, never to return. But this was not the only threat the settlers faced. Another danger lurked in the jungle, an escaped convict named Lopo de Castro. He had broken out of prison several years earlier and was now leading a gang of criminals in the area. They robbed and murdered anyone who entered the jungle, and soon they set their sights on the settlement of Iratapuru. On March 1923, a group of men left the settlement to collect seeds. They never returned. Over the next few days, more and more people went missing until virtually everyone in the settlement was gone. Some believe they were taken by Castro's gang, while others think they were killed by the indigenous people. But there is one thing that everyone agrees on. No one knows for sure what happened to the people of Iratapuru. Their disappearance was never solved, and the settlement was never rebuilt. Today, all that remains of Iratapuru are the crumbling walls of its buildings and the mystery of what happened to its people. What do you think happened to the people of Iratapuru? Were they taken by an escaped convict and his gang? Did they flee for their lives from attacks by indigenous people? Or was there another explanation for their disappearance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content. I would also like to take a moment to say a special thank you to our supporters whose names you can see on screen right now. If you would like to see your name on the screen and show the world your support for the channel, join our membership program today. I'll see you next time. When I was invited to speak at an education conference this past summer, I jumped at the opportunity. Not only do I love talking about horror movies, but my favorite movie of all time is the Brazilian film O Auto da Compadecida, known internationally as No Grace for the Wicked. This 2000 film, directed by Guel Aras and starring Selton Mello, is a dark, comedy crime drama that I can watch over and over again and still find something new to appreciate. It's one of the few films where I laugh out loud 1 minute and am moved to tears the next. It's amazing. And while it's not a horror movie, there are some genuinely terrifying moments, like this one. The camera lingers on a weathered blackboard inside the schoolhouse. Chalk scrawled in desperate handwriting, "No ha salvação." There is no salvation. The sound design sharpens with a screech of chalk dragging across slate. Then a close-up of the teacher's face, his eyes wide and wild. He looks at the children with fear and says, "What have I done?" The children respond in unison, their voices echoing in the cavernous space, "You have given us no hope." And then they start to chant, "There is no salvation," as the teacher sinks to his knees in defeat. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, let me give you a little context. The film takes place in the impoverished northeast region of Brazil in the 1960s. It follows two small-time criminals, João Grilo and Chiquelo, who escape the police after a robbery by hiding out in a rural town. There, they meet up with an old friend, the now-disgraced teacher, and the three of them hatch a plan to con the local priest out of his life savings. But things don't go according to plan, and soon our two protagonists find themselves wanted by the police once again. So, why does a scene featuring a desperate teacher seeking salvation through religion appear in a dark comedy crime drama? Let's take a look at the themes of despair and hopelessness in No Grace for the Wicked. Join me, won't you, for another edition of... One of the most striking elements of No Grace for the Wicked is its visual style. The film is set in a poverty-stricken region of Brazil, and the filmmakers do not shy away from depicting the harsh realities of life for those living in extreme poverty. Homes are made of scrap metal and dilapidated buildings. Streets are dusty and the people are malnourished. The black and white cinematography adds to the film's stark visual impact, emphasizing the bleakness of the characters' existence. In addition to the visual poverty, the film also portrays the spiritual poverty of the characters. Many of the townspeople are deeply religious, but their faith seems to offer them little comfort or hope for a better future. The character of the teacher embodies this spiritual despair. He has clearly lost faith in both God and humanity, and has given up on life altogether. His famous blackboard scene perfectly encapsulates his despair. In a moment of weakness, he writes, "There is no salvation," and is immediately confronted with the hopelessness of his existence. The children's response to his despair is both terrifying and sad. They chant, "There is no salvation," back at him, mocking his attempt to cling to hope. The scene is made even more disturbing by the use of sound design. The screeching of chalk on slate emphasizes the rawness of the teacher's despair. The overall effect of the film's portrayal of poverty and despair is both heartbreaking and thought-provoking. Viewers are confronted with the harsh realities of life for those living in extreme poverty, and are forced to consider the difficult questions surrounding hope, faith, and the human condition. So, what makes No Grace for the Wicked? Such a powerful film is not just its portrayal of poverty and despair, but also its depiction of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of these challenges. Despite the bleak circumstances they find themselves in, the characters in the film continue to hope for a better future. They may be poor and their faith may be waning, but they refuse to give up on life itself. If you've never seen No Grace for the Wicked, I highly recommend it. It's a truly remarkable film that will stay with you long after you've seen it. It's a powerful story about hope, faith, and the human condition, and it's a must-watch for anyone who loves great cinema. Thanks for watching. Houses. We searched every house. The officials opened up each home with their master key, the one that opens every front door in the city. And what did we find? Well, the same thing in each house. Unfinished meals rotting on plates, candles burned down to their end, beds unmade, but no bodies. The people had vanished. There were hundreds of homes like this across the country, all with the same story. The neighbors said it started subtly. At first, it was just an annoyance. Things like mail left unopened, newspapers piled up on the driveway, dog poop accumulating on the lawn. But then those things started happening inside the houses, too. Food left on the table, cold and congealed, week-old coffee gone sour in the pot. Drawers left open, clothes strewn across the floor. Fridges with meat still thawing from the day before. Mail piled up on the kitchen counter, the TV playing static, the front door unlocked. At first, some people thought it was a joke, a prank by some bored kids. But when they realized it was happening inside their own homes, they knew it wasn't funny. When we arrived at the first house, there were hundreds of these reports already in. We went from town to town, house to house, searching for answers. What we found were more questions. What happened here? Where are the people? Why is everything left behind? Did they run away and leave all their stuff behind? Or were they taken away? By who? And where did they go? We searched the houses for clues, fingerprints, anything to indicate what happened, who was responsible. All we found were unanswered questions and a few spiders. It was like a horror movie come to life, except there was no blood, no dead bodies, only absence. And then there were the animals. As we made our way through the deserted towns, we saw pets everywhere, dogs, cats, even a parakeet or two. They were in the houses, tied up in the yards, meowing pitifully. They were hungry and thirsty. Some of them hadn't been fed in days. We took them to a vet. They were all healthy, but scared and confused, just like the rest of us. The mayor said we should leave the animals behind, that someone would come for them eventually. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't just leave them there alone. So we took the dogs with us. We walked the streets and knocked on doors, but no one answered. Many of the houses we visited were like that. untouched since the day they were abandoned. It was eerie. It felt like the entire country had been evacuated, but no one had told us why. The television showed images of crowded streets, of cars bumper to bumper, of people going about their daily lives. It was like nothing unusual was happening. There were no reports of missing persons, no Amber Alerts, no evacuations. The world was going about its business as if nothing out of the ordinary was happening. But we kept looking, kept asking questions. And finally, after weeks on the road, we found something, a single sheet of paper tucked into the front door of one of the houses. On it, a message scrawled in hurried handwriting. "Take the long way around. The short way is never clear," it said. What did it mean? The short way is never clear. Was that a warning? Was someone trying to tell us something? We pondered the cryptic note as we drove, as we walked, as we searched. Then, slowly, it began to make sense. We had been taking the long way around, avoiding the big cities, hoping to stay off the radar. But what if the answer lay in the cities? So we turned around and headed east, following the sun. We didn't know what we were looking for, but we hoped the cities might hold the answer, the reason for the abandoned houses, the missing people, the cryptic note. We kept driving until we reached the outskirts of a large city. And there, on a billboard, a sign pointing the way to downtown, the short way, the one that was never clear. Welcome back to the channel. The year is 2023 and this is our village. It's another typical day. Nothing has changed since the last time you visited. But me, I'm a little different. I've been to quite a few places like this, but this one, there's something about it that just doesn't feel right. Something tells me I should turn back, but curiosity gets the better of me and I press on. So let's go to the center of the village. There's our meeting point. We're going to head into the main building here, the armory, and then right here is a safe. So let's open this up and see what's inside. There are no guns in this safe, but there are some rifles and some bullets. And I thought to myself, if this was abandoned, why didn't they take the guns with them? If they were attacked, why leave their defenses behind? If they fled, why leave in silence? And I continued to investigate around the village, around the houses, and the more I looked, the more I found. There was a whole bunch of fishing gear left behind, also some farming tools. Who abandons their tools and their weapons? This isn't like a war zone. There's no tanks, there's no burnt-out vehicles. There is nothing except for this primary school. But I can't even get inside. There's a big metal gate and it's locked. It's at this point I start to feel uneasy, very uneasy, because I'm thinking to myself, did these people just pack up and leave? Did they get in their cars, wave goodbye, and drive off into the sunset? Because that's not what it looks like here. It looks like an entire people just walked away from their lives. Their dogs are still here. Their beds are still here. Their clothes are still here in the wardrobes. Even the food is still here in the cupboards. It looks like they just walked away and never came back. I climbed up onto the roof of one of the buildings just to get a lay of the land, to see if I could spot anything unusual, and that's when I saw it. There, in the distance, on top of that hill, a camp. I couldn't make out what it was. It was too far away. But I knew I had to get closer, so I grabbed my rifle and I headed up the hill. There was a dirt road leading up to it, but it was overgrown and barely visible. As I got closer, I started to hear voices of people talking and laughing. Suddenly, the forest came to life with the sound of a helicopter. I ducked behind a bush and I saw this big black helicopter land in front of that camp. Out stepped 3 men in military uniform. They were followed by 2 women. All 5 of them were carrying weapons. They had just come from that camp and they were heading in this direction. I hid in that bush until they passed, and then I ran back to the village. I didn't want to tell anyone where I'd been, where I'd seen these people. I was scared. I was scared of what they might do, who they might be. I was scared that they might have followed me. I was scared that I wasn't safe. I spent the rest of the night looking for somewhere to hide, somewhere to feel safe, anywhere to hide. And as the sun came up, I made a decision. I was going to leave this place and I was never coming back. because as I sat there watching the sunrise, I realized that none of this was real, that this was just a movie set, that those people weren't real. But there was something about the way it looked, something about the silence of the place that made me think that it really was real. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. Until next time. Hello, everyone. It's me, number 6, The Lost Colony. Between 1922 and 1926, Brazil was in an uproar. The country was in the midst of a violent revolution that saw its fair share of bloodshed. The government at the time was doing everything they could to put down the rebellion. As one might expect, the violence was not limited to the combatants. Civilians were caught in the crossfire. Villagers were being burned out of their homes, and some even accused of being revolutionaries and summarily executed. In the small village of Vargem Grande do Sul, 600 people decided they had enough. They gathered together what little they could and fled for their lives. Some say they went north to the neighboring town of Santa Maria. Others say they headed south to the nearest big city, Porto Alegre. But, according to local legend, the people just disappeared. There are no records of them arriving in any other town. There were no mass graves found with their bodies. And, most mysteriously of all, there were no witnesses. One day, a traveler came across the abandoned village. He must have been the first person to set foot in Vargem Grande do Sul since the mysterious disappearance. He would later recount what he saw to the local paper, the Brazilian newspaper O Estado de São Paulo. According to his account, the traveler came across a home with its gate left ajar. Inside, he found overturned chairs, a table with a half-eaten meal still on it, and a cradle with a baby's bottle still warm. Outside, he saw a horse with its saddle and bridle still in place. The traveler even claimed to see the ghost of a man who had apparently been shot while trying to flee the village. The traveler gathered that these people had been enjoying a peaceful life until something terrible happened, forcing them to leave in such a hurry that they didn't even bother to take their livestock with them. They disappeared into thin air, the traveler whispered. What happened to the people of Vargem Grande do Sul? Did they really vanish into thin air, or did they simply blend into the populace of another town? It doesn't seem likely that 600 people could go missing without a trace, yet there is no evidence to suggest otherwise. Maybe we'll never know what happened to them. Or maybe the truth is right in front of us and we're just too blind to see it. Which brings us to our next strange mystery, the vanishing hitchhiker. The year was 1948, and a young woman named Dorothy Arnold disappeared without a trace. She was last seen hitchhiking along the side of a road in upstate New York. Despite an extensive search, she was never found. Over the years, her picture has become one of the most iconic images of missing persons, though some believe she may have staged her own disappearance. Why? Because of this grainy black and white photo taken shortly before she vanished. In it, Dorothy appears to be smiling, waving at someone off camera. But look closely. Is that a sinister grin or something more? Some say it looks like the kind of smile someone might wear when they're about to pull off a very convincing disappearing act. But why would she do such a thing? And what happened to her after she slipped out of her pursuer's grasp? We may never know. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the series, where I explore more bizarre mysteries of the unexplained. See you next time. The year is 1967, and for 5 nights straight, the villagers of Hoia Baciu in Romania heard disembodied voices in the night, whispers that seemed to come from the forest itself. The whispers were eerie and foreboding, and nobody could explain them. And then the people started disappearing. This is a place called Hoer Verde. It's just outside of the village. It's an area of dense forest, an old logging area where the trees are abnormally tall, even by Romanian standards. And it's here where the villagers believed something very strange was going on. Because what happened next was beyond bizarre. 14 people vanished without a trace. 3 teenagers disappeared while walking home from a party. A mother and her 2 children vanished while gathering berries. An elderly couple was out walking, and they also vanished. And in all, 14 people would disappear in and around this forest over a time frame of only 18 months. The story doesn't end there. There were survivors, people who lived to tell the tale, and they all had one thing in common. They saw strange lights in the sky over the forest days before they vanished. They described these lights as luminous, greenish, yellowish orbs that floated slowly through the nighttime sky. Some said they looked like balloons or bubbles floating in the wind. Others said they resembled gigantic eyes staring down at the world below. A group of scientists came to investigate. They set up camp near the edge of the forest and watched the night sky. Within 3 hours, they witnessed the very same phenomena. Strange, glowing orbs floating through the darkness, moving silently and slowly. The scientists recorded their observations and took measurements, but they too would vanish within weeks. What happened next is perhaps the strangest part of the story. For years afterward, the villagers avoided the forest. They were terrified to go inside. But after a while, people began to drift back to the woods to gather berries and firewood. And it was then that they began to find the bodies of the missing people. 14 bodies were found in total, all of them near the edge of the forest, as if they had been dumped there after being pulled into the woods. The authorities conducted autopsies, but they were unable to determine a cause of death. All of the bodies showed signs of decomposition, which made sense given that some of the bodies had been missing for years. But what did not make sense was that all of the bodies had strange circular marks around their necks, as if they had been strangled by a wide rubber band or rope. But this still wasn't the end of the story. There were more bizarre developments to come. People continued to go missing in the Hoer Verde forest, and new witnesses came forward with strange stories. One witness said that he saw the body of a missing woman near a clearing. He said that she was kneeling as if in prayer and that her arms were outstretched as if she were embracing a tall, thin, metallic figure that was standing behind her. Another witness said that he saw the same woman standing on the edge of a cliff, and when he asked her what she was doing there, she turned around and stared at him with soulless eyes and a creepy smile. And then she vanished. Many people believe that the forest is haunted and that the spirits of the dead are trapped there, forever seeking the living to join them. But others say that there is something more sinister going on, that there is a dark presence in the forest that feeds on human life. Whatever the truth may be, the Hoer Verde forest remains a mystery to this day. If you want to hear another scary story, stay tuned for more content. A chill wind cut through the skeletal trees, whispering secrets from beyond the grave. Their roots, gnarled fingers clawing at the earth, their branches scraping the sky like old bones. It was here in this desolate place that the locals spoke of a curse born of anger from those whose final resting place had been disturbed. I stood before them, a lone figure silhouetted against the bruised November sky, my breath misting in the frigid air. Behind me, the small town of Havenwood huddled in the valley like a frightened animal. This was the edge of human habitation. Beyond this wood, the land fell away into wild, untamed wilderness. Some said the land itself was cursed, that it hungered for souls. They pointed to the twisted trees as proof, for what else could explain their tortured forms? I, however, scoffed at such superstitions. As the new sheriff in town, logic and reason were my tools, not folklore and fear. Still, when I'd come to Havenwood 6 months prior, the townsfolk's tales had made my skin crawl. Of an ancient burial ground desecrated when the settlers arrived, of bodies unearthed during the construction of the railroad, of angry spirits that demanded retribution. I'd investigated, of course, and found no evidence of any curse, only the remnants of a culture long gone and a history of tragedy. The tribe that had lived here had been forced to flee when the settlers came, driven by the same dark force that had brought me here today. A development company wanted to build a resort on the outskirts of town, but the locals had protested, citing the curse and the sanctity of the burial grounds. The company, eager to quell the controversy and make a tidy profit, had offered to build a memorial park here in the woods instead. And so it was that I found myself standing at the edge of the proposed park, the wind snatching at my coat as it slithered between the trees. There was something undeniably eerie about the place. My grandfather, a man of science, had once told me that fear was the only true ghost. Perhaps he was right. For all the rational explanations in the world, some things simply couldn't be explained. I walked into the woods, crunching on dead leaves, my eyes scanning the ground for any sign of a proper burial site. What I found instead was a rusted shovel and a pile of dirt. Hadn't the people who unearthed these bones been careful to hide their crime? Or had they simply not thought I'd come looking for them? As I brushed the dirt from the bones, a flash of movement in the corner of my eye made me whirl around, but there was nothing there, just more skeletal trees and the deepening shadows. Beneath them, more bones lay hidden, waiting to be discovered. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and blood orange. It was almost beautiful, if you didn't know what was coming next. Then the wind began to rise, whipping through the trees and carrying with it the scent of rain and decay. The branches beat against one another, creating a chorus of wails that echoed through the woods. And then I heard it, a voice carried on the wind, the voice of a woman. Her words were lost to the howling, but her tone was clear, filled with a sorrow so profound it touched something deep within me. Who was she? And what had brought her and others like her to this forsaken place? The temperature dropped as quickly as night had fallen, and I pulled my coat tighter around me. The wind seemed to grow angrier, gnashing its teeth against the trees, trying to break them. Was this the curse the locals spoke of? Was this the price they had to pay for disturbing the dead? I turned and ran, stumbling over tree roots and fallen branches, the woman's voice echoing behind me, urging me to flee. I burst out of the woods and onto the road, not stopping until I reached the safety of my car. In the rearview mirror, I saw the trees swaying in the darkness, their branches clawing at the sky. And as the last vestiges of daylight faded, I drove away from the cursed land, the woman's voice fading with it. Some say the dead reclaimed what was theirs. Hello, it's me. This is my channel. And today, I want to share with you another interesting cover-up conspiracy theory that I came across on the internet. It's not about aliens or UFOs, it's about the Brazilian military. And here we go. The year is 1986. Two pilots, both lieutenants in the Brazilian Air Force, are flying over the small town of Varginha in the state of Paraíba. Their mission, a routine photo reconnaissance flight over a local sugar plantation. But what the pilots see in the images they capture that day would forever change their lives. In the photos, there is a perfectly circular object approximately 40 meters in diameter resting on the plantation. The object has no discernible features, no windows, no doors, nothing. Yet somehow it glistens in the sunlight as if it were metallic. The military cover-up conspiracy theorists say that this was no ordinary object. It was a crashed UFO. According to the conspiracy, the Brazilian military knew full well that this was an extraterrestrial spacecraft, but they quickly implemented a cover-up to hide the truth from the public. First, they sent the pilots home for the day without telling them anything about what they had seen. Then they dispatched a team to the crash site to recover the object. But the team didn't find anything out of the ordinary. According to the official story, when they arrived at the site, all they saw was a large rock monolith. But according to the conspiracy, the object was gone, taken by the military to be reverse engineered. Then the conspiracies take a darker turn. The two pilots were ordered to keep quiet and sign documents stating that they would never discuss their sighting with anyone. Ever since, the military has kept tight-lipped about the incident and destroyed all evidence of its occurrence. Even stranger, the pilots have been followed and harassed by mysterious men ever since. They have received numerous threats, and one of them even saw a black van with tinted windows following him around town. Some conspiracy theorists even believe that the government murdered one of the pilots, Lieutenant AP. 25 years later, his remains were found near a dam with a bullet hole in his skull. Was it suicide or murder? The cover-up claims that in 1987, an official report on the incident was published, but that report mysteriously went missing. All except for one page which managed to survive, perhaps hidden away in a private collection or lost in the bureaucracy of government offices. This is the page that shows the object's size, shape, and color, as well as other technical details. It also mentions that the object was made of a strange material unlike anything the military had ever seen before. Some conspiracy theorists even claim that they have seen the original report, which contains even more shocking details. According to them, the report states that the object weighed over 3 tons and emitted a strong magnetic field. It also seemed to be intelligently designed with a complex internal structure. So, what did the Brazilian military find in 1986? Was it a UFO, a top-secret military project, or something else entirely? The truth may never be known, but the conspiracy theories surrounding this case continue to thrive, fueled by the lack of transparency from the Brazilian government. This bizarre tale emerged from Brazil, but similar stories have appeared around the world. In each case, a military or intelligence agency discovers evidence of extraterrestrial life and then does everything they can to hide it from the public. Is there any truth to these claims? It's impossible to say for sure. But one thing is certain. The world is full of mysteries that we may never fully understand. There are so many crazy things happening in our world today that it's hard to know what to focus on. Every day there are breaking news stories that can impact your investments, your savings, your retirement accounts, and your quality of life. And now you know one of the craziest conspiracy theories that people believe to be true. If you have any thoughts or information about this topic, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. The fire is almost out now, but I can still feel its heat on my face, the smell of smoke in my nostrils. I'm standing on the edge of a hill overlooking what used to be a village, a massacre site. There are no survivors that we know of. There are some bodies strewn around, burnt beyond recognition. It's hard to look at, hard to comprehend. And yet, just before the sun dipped below the horizon last night, a handful of people emerged from the trees, stumbled out of the woods. They were covered in blood and dirt, their clothes torn and tattered, and they told us that they had seen the attack coming. They had watched it happen from the forest, and then they ran. They hid. They stayed silent until the attackers were long gone. And then they came out of the trees and told their story. There was a farmer who claimed he saw the villagers walking single file into the forest. He didn't see any of them come out. He said that they walked with no emotion, blank-eyed, carrying nothing, not even their children. They just walked into the forest and disappeared. He swore he heard the sound of hundreds of footsteps behind him as he fled for his life. Now, we looked in the forest, but it's so dark now we couldn't see anything. We found no trace of the missing villagers, no bodies, no signs of a struggle. It's as if they simply vanished. The only evidence of their presence here today are the things they left behind, abandoned in the dust and the few stories that the survivors tell. One woman told me she had been gathering herbs by the river when she heard screams in the village. When she turned toward the noise, she saw a group of men on horseback charging through the village, firing their guns into the air. She saw people fall where they stood, others drop to their knees and then run, heard the screams of mothers, the terror in their voices as they clutched their children close, trying to shield them from the bullets and the horsemen. She said that she understood then that the attack was on everyone, on all of us. So she dropped to the ground, pulled her skirt up around her waist, and crawled as fast as she could through the tall grass on the edge of the village. She said that she dared not look back, but she could hear the horses behind her, their heavy pounding in the ground like thunder, growing louder, closer. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. She heard shouts in a language that wasn't hers, guttural and harsh. Then silence. She stayed there on the ground, hugging a clump of grass in her hands, the taste of fear in her mouth, knowing that if she was caught, she would be killed. She stayed there until the sun went down and the fire started. Another survivor told a similar story, of a lone horseman who came to the village, calling for the men to come see something hilarious. Apparently, one of the men had climbed up a tall building and was dancing on its roof, arms outstretched like a madman, screaming and yelling, and the horse. The horseman was laughing, and he called on all the men of the village to come and watch this spectacle. So many men went, she said, more than half the village. They left their women and children behind and went to see what was so funny about a man dancing on a rooftop. And when they were gone, she heard the screams and the gunfire. She saw the flames from her hiding place and knew what had happened. We don't know how many men went missing. No one knows what happened to them. The only evidence of the attack are the stories the survivors tell, the tales of blank-eyed villagers, of men dancing on rooftops and the sound of hundreds of footsteps following closely behind. And as I stand here looking at the charred remains of the village, I keep hearing that sound, the heavy thud of hundreds of footsteps coming closer, getting louder, and I turn and run. Do you ever wonder what happens to a place once it's been abandoned? What happens to a town or a building or an entire country if no one takes care of it? Well, today we're gonna find out. Welcome to my channel. Today we are exploring Hoer Verde in Brazil. Once a thriving town, it is now a lost world reclaimed by nature. So let's take a look around. All around the town, ivy has completely choked and covered these wooden beams. It's slowly inching up this wall, and it won't be long until it's completely covered. Ivy has also taken over this old building and has even begun to cover the roof. And here we can see the roof has completely collapsed in on itself. As we make our way further into the town, we come across this house, and it looks like the owner wasn't able to get out in time and has simply been left behind. We can see their clothes right there on the bed, and it really makes you wonder what happened. Were they taken by the military? Did they flee? Or did they just leave it all behind? Whatever happened, they didn't make it out because this teddy bear is still sitting right there in the corner. We then begin to walk through the overgrown streets of this abandoned town. And everywhere we look, nature is reclaiming the streets. Trees and vines have completely overtaken this playground. And it looks like this tire swing is getting a workout, even though there's no kids around. Roots are beginning to crack the concrete and break through the pavement. And this statue has become one with the trees. The school has also been taken over by the jungle. We can see how the roots are growing up through the concrete and breaking apart the walls. Vines and trees are growing out of the windows and the roof. It looks like the students had a great day at school when the army arrived because all of their books are still sitting right there at their desks. It looks like this gym was right next door to the school. And when we walk inside, we can see that the jungle has completely taken over. There are so many trees and vines growing everywhere. This place must have been abandoned for at least 20 years now, because this tree has grown right through the floor and right through the basketball court. When we step outside, we can see that the walls are completely covered in graffiti, but it's hard to read because nature is taking over the town. One thing that really stood out to me was this old refrigerator. Why would someone leave an old fridge behind, and why would it still be here all these years later? And finally, we reach the main square of the town, and it looks like this church was the center of life here. But now it's surrounded by tall weeds and the roof has caved in. But perhaps the most haunting image is the swing set in front of the church. This really gives the feeling that the children were evacuated quickly and they just left their toys behind. So, what exactly is going on here? What made the residents of Hoer Verde abandon their homes? Well, the story of this town is actually pretty sad. In the early 1980s, the Brazilian government built a huge dam nearby, and it was hoped that this would bring jobs and prosperity to the area. But instead, it flooded the land and completely changed the environment. The people who lived in the small town of Hoer Verde were forced to relocate to another town named Hoer Verde. But only a few months after they arrived, they began to get sick. Many of them had to go to the hospital, but by the time they got there, it was too late. They had been poisoned by the toxic gases being released from the nearby dam. As more and more people got sick, people began to flee the town. Within a year, 60% of the houses were abandoned, and soon after, the entire town was empty. Years later, when people began to return to the town, they found that nature had completely reclaimed the area. Trees and plants were growing everywhere. Animals had returned to the area, and it looked like a true lost world. But unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. In recent years, looters have begun to show up, stripping the buildings of everything they can sell. They even tore down some of the buildings and used the wood to sell as firewood. As you can see, nature is truly powerful and will reclaim anything if given enough time. But it's sad that this town and its people became victims of the Brazilian government's greed. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the series I have on the Amazon. Thanks for watching. And now for something different, something a little bit more spine-tingling. How do you feel about ghost hunting? Do you think that the dead can ever truly rest in peace, or do you think that they might want to try and contact us from beyond the grave? Well, if you're in the Transylvania region of Romania, you don't really have a choice in the matter. The spirits are very eager to make their presence known here. So much so that even the bravest of souls can be driven insane. And it's all thanks to the legend of Vlad the Impaler. Vlad the Impaler, also known as Count Dracula, was the Prince of Wallachia between 1448 and 1476. He was infamous for his blood-drinking habits and his taste for human flesh. Now, obviously, we all know that he was the inspiration for Bram Stoker's famous novel Dracula. But did you know that there is a place that is named after him? Yes, welcome to Transylvania. The area was originally inhabited by Germanic tribes before being taken over by the Roman Empire in the 2nd century AD. Throughout its history, it has been ruled by many different kings and princes, but none were as feared as Vlad Impaler. He ruled like a god over his people, taking whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. And when I say he took what he wanted, I mean he took their blood. He dipped his bread in it, he washed his clothes in it, and he even used it as a form of currency. Talk about a royal pain in the neck. After Vlad died, the people of Transylvania were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. But soon they would be introduced to another ruler just as bad as the last, and this one was female. Queen Mary, also known as Mary the Bloody, ruled with an iron fist. She had no problem torturing and killing anyone who opposed her, and she did it with a smile on her face. Her reign of terror lasted from 1510 to 1559, and during that time she managed to make the lives of the people of Transylvania absolutely miserable. But eventually she too died, and things started to look up for the people of Transylvania. That was until another queen came along. This one was named Elizabeth, and she was just as bad as Mary the Bloody. She liked to throw lavish parties and invite all of the royalty from neighboring countries. And when I say lavish, I mean bloody. She hosted feasts where the main course was human meat. The guests would go wild and eat until they were sick. Then Elizabeth would come out and enjoy watching them suffer. She was the queen of sadism, and she ruled from 1560 to 1579. Now, you may be wondering why I'm telling you all this. Well, I'm not. Actually, I am. All of these rulers were obsessed with blood, and they used it in their rituals and ceremonies. They believed that drinking blood could give them immortality, and they were willing to do anything to obtain it. Well, the people of Transylvania suffered because of these rulers' obsessions. They were tortured, mutilated, and killed, and their blood was used to satisfy the rulers' bloodlust. And today, the spirits of these people are said to roam the land. According to legend, if you listen closely, you can hear their cries of pain and suffering. Some have even claimed to hear faint chanting in the distance. And if you're brave enough to investigate, you may just stumble upon the source of the sound. It's said that if you do, you may be able to communicate with the spirits and learn their story. Or maybe you'll just end up like the ghost hunters of today. Modern exploration. Present day, ghost hunters, urban explorers, and historians wander the ruins. They say that if you explore the castle at night, you might see the ghosts of the impaled victims. Some have even claimed to have heard cries and faint chanting. On screen, a distorted voice rasps, "No ha salvação," which means there is no salvation. Is this the sound of restless spirits or just some creepy background noise? Well, it's up to you to decide. We've all heard of sleep paralysis. It's that terrifying moment when your mind is wide awake, but your body won't move. Tonight, we look at a case where sleep paralysis may have turned deadly. This is The Host, and this is Unexplained. It was July 1974. 23-year-old Danny Rolling had just moved to a new apartment in the Florida State University area. He was visiting his favorite record store, Vinyl Manor, when he met two men who invited him to a party that night. He accepted and followed them to an apartment complex on Copeland Street. According to Danny, the next thing he remembered was waking up on the floor in his new apartment. Confused, he looked around. The apartment was in total disarray. Pillows and curtains were strewn across the floor. Furniture was overturned and there were strange symbols drawn on the walls. Then he noticed something even stranger, a symbol on his own arm. It looked like a large oval with smaller circles branching out from it like spokes on a wheel. Danny went to wash the symbol off in the sink, but no matter how hard he scrubbed, it wouldn't come off. Panicked, he drove home. His roommate wasn't there, but his sister was. She helped him scrub the symbol off his arm, but by the time they got it removed, another one had appeared in its place. By the end of the day, Danny had managed to remove 5 symbols. But overnight, 7 more appeared. They covered his entire arm. He tried everything to get rid of them, but they wouldn't budge. Meanwhile, the local police were investigating a string of burglaries in the area. They seemed random, with nothing stolen except for some food items and a pair of shoes. The victims' homes also seemed to be targeted at random. One victim even claimed that the thief had rearranged her furniture, and in one apartment, the walls were covered with bizarre symbols. As it turned out, these symbols matched the ones on Danny's arm. So, did all of these break-ins somehow involve Danny? And what were those symbols? We may never know the answers to these questions. Danny died on September 6, 1974. He was found dead in his car in front of his apartment building. The cause of death was given as multiple stab wounds, but many believe that Danny was killed for stumbling upon a secret cult and their rituals. Some say the cult wanted to use Danny in their ceremonies, while others say that he simply witnessed too much and was killed to protect the cult's identity. Was this a murder or a suicide? And was there really a cult? To this day, it remains a mystery. There are several theories about the cult and its connection to Danny. Perhaps the most popular theory is that the cult was responsible for both the burglaries and Danny's death. But who were they, and what did they want? Sadly, we don't know. Many believe that the cult had ties to satanic worship. This is largely due to the pentagram symbol found at the crime scene. Pentagrams are often associated with Satanism, although many other cultures throughout history have used the symbol in religious ceremonies. Because of this, investigators believe that the pentagram may have been a coincidence, or that it had nothing to do with any cult activity. Then there's the theory that Danny made the whole thing up. Maybe he was hallucinating and wrote the whole story about a cult in his head. There's no evidence to support this theory, though. In fact, similar symbols were found in several of the burglary locations, not just Danny's apartment. One of the strangest theories is that the markings on Danny's body were caused by mass possession. If this is true, then what exactly does that mean? Did an evil spirit possess Danny's body and then leave marks on him during sleep paralysis? Or did multiple spirits possess him at once? Does this explain the pentagrams as well? Maybe. But if this is true, why didn't the spirits communicate with Danny or speak through him? And why did they stop at leaving markings on his body? Some believe that Danny unwittingly stumbled upon a dangerous group, perhaps even a cult. But what if he didn't see members of the group, but rather their leader? Could this cult leader have somehow used hypnotism or suggestion to implant false memories into Danny's head? Maybe. But if so, why kill him? And why stage the scene to look like a burglary? Perhaps the craziest theory is that the entire community was swallowed by a cult ritual. If this is true, then it makes sense that people saw strange symbols in their homes and some even reported missing items. But how could an entire community join a cult without anyone noticing? And what happened to them? Did they all willingly abandon society to join the cult, or were they taken against their will? In the end, there are more questions than answers. What do you think happened to Danny and those strange symbols? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. As always, thanks for watching. Until next time. From the series The Vanished. Episode 3. The Chalkboard. 600 lives, a village erased, and the question remains, where did they go? And will they return? Fade in. A close-up of the chalkboard. The words are glowing faintly as if freshly written. Pull back to reveal the jungle. Vines and weeds growing through the cracks in the concrete. A single wooden chair sits in front of the board. The jungle is alive with the sounds of insects and birds. The wind rustles the leaves. A low, ominous hum resonates through the trees. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out. A man stumbles into the clearing, clutching his shoulder. He's bleeding. He collapses into the chair. This is David. His clothes are torn and dirty. He looks up at the board, then back at the jungle. He whispers, "They found me. They followed me." He looks around wildly, then back at the board. "Please, I need your help. I don't understand what's happening. Where am I? What's this place?" He slumps in the chair. "I just want to go home." A voice echoes through the trees. "You can't go home, David. Not now. Not ever." David screams and drops to his knees. "Who's there? Show yourself." Silence. Only the sound of the jungle. David stands up slowly, his eyes wide with fear. "Please, please help me." He runs from the clearing, crashing through the undergrowth. The figure emerges from the trees. He watches David go. Then he too disappears into the jungle. The camera returns to the chalkboard. Close up on the words 600 lives, then the word gone. Pull back to reveal a jungle hut. It's small and dilapidated. Vines and weeds grow around it. A single oil lamp hangs from the roof. Inside, an old woman stirs a pot over a fire. She's stirring the life out of it. She sings a haunting melody as she works. She turns to the camera and speaks in a low voice. "There was a time when people lived here. A time when laughter echoed through these trees and the river flowed with life. But that was before the hunger came, before the whispers in the night drove them mad. They left, running for their lives, abandoning everything they had ever known. They left and never looked back. Or did they?" She pauses, her eyes distant. "Sometimes I see their faces in my dreams, the ones who stay behind. They walk the earth as shadows, lost and alone. They wander the jungles, searching for a way home. But there is no way home. Not now, not ever." The camera pans to a shelf filled with old photographs. The woman reaches out to touch one, then stops. She looks back at the camera. When the last of the sun sets, when the moon is high in the sky, they return, drawn back to the place they once called home. They gather in the clearing, whispering stories of the world beyond. They dance beneath the stars, trying to outrun the darkness within, and sometimes, just sometimes, I hear their voices in the wind. I hear their laughter in the rustle of the leaves, and I see their faces in the shadows of the trees. But as the first rays of dawn touch the earth, they vanish. They melt away into the mist, leaving only their memories behind. And so it goes, day after day, year after year. The villagers forever trapped between worlds, their souls forever bound to this place. The camera focuses on the old woman's face. Her eyes are filled with sadness. And I am left here, the keeper of their stories, the guardian of their dreams, waiting for the day when they might finally find peace. The camera fades to black as jungle sounds swell ominously.